In that context, during your speakership, total spend, domestic discretionary spending cut, total spending went up about 12%, total revenues went up about 35%, which suggests thriving economy. Because even if you cut domestic discretionary spending, entitlement reform, or the rise of entitlements is going to lead to spending increase. Some people would argue that the budget was balanced not so much because of spending reductions, but was balanced because you presided over a fairly robust economy. 35% revenue growth is a fairly robust economy. And then we can't really balance the budget structurally. We have to hope for good times. No, the only thing is a good economy.
Except when I was speaker, we had the only major entitlement reforms of your lifetime. I mean, so we did reform entitlements. It's called welfare. We also reformed Medicare. We saved $200 billion on Medicare over a 10-year period. And so these were pretty big entitlement reforms. But again, people don't, the way Washington keeps score, you could never run your family budget, and you could never solve the problem, because they get involved in annual budget cycles. Now imagine you tried to figure out how to pay for your home on an annual budget. And you had no idea about a 30-year mortgage. It never occurred to you that you could amortize the debt over time. You had no idea of thinking, gee, how much do I owe monthly? And so instead they came to you and said, you can have as big a house as you can pay for this year. Well, almost all of us would not have a house. Or if we had a house, it would be about the size of a dog shed. You know, because we sure wouldn't be able to go out with our disposable annual income, we wouldn't be able to afford a house. So let me give you the example about Social Security. We have a proposal at newt.org for young people that they should have the right to choose. Notice, I didn't say forced them. The right to choose a personal Social Security savings account. Now, we know this model works. This is not a theory, because you can study Chile and you can study Galveston, Texas, which is the one place in America that has adopted this model. And for our purposes, since I was campaigning in Iowa, it turned out that the principal group in Des Moines is one of the major administrators of the Chilean system. And so they have a Chilean vice president for international affairs, and so we had a great chat one afternoon about their experience. In the 30 years of the Chilean system, and the way it's designed, they guarantee that if your savings drop below the Social Security rate, the government will make up the difference. I mean, it's a very limited risk for the government, because it only makes up the difference to get you back up to the minimum Social Security. So having made that commitment, in 30 years, they've never written a single check. And the reason is, if you take your money from the time you're 16, 17, 18, whatever age you are when you get your first check, and you put your half of Social Security tax into a savings account, and it builds up compound interest annually, you get between 2 and 3 times the amount of retirement you would get on a Social Security. So even if it's a bad year, you're getting more than 1. So you're above the Social Security baseline. And this, again, we have 30 years of experience both in Galveston, Texas, and with the entire country of Chile. So what does this do? I mean, again, imagine you have 80 million people in the American workforce who would be in a personal savings account system. First of all, you build up an enormous amount of capital. Chile today has 72% of its economy in the Social Security Trust Fund. So much so that the Chilean government now permits Chileans to invest a percentage of their savings overseas, because the Chilean economy can't absorb all the savings. That's how big the savings is. Second, Martin Feldstein at Harvard calculated that if you had this, and this is why I talked about 1-year budgeting versus a lifetime, okay? If you try to solve this problem over a lifetime, because you're making every eligible person who chooses this plan a capitalist, and every single person who chooses this plan is investing and saving, it turns out you reduce wealth inequality in America by 50%. Because suddenly everybody has an estate. In the current system, you pay the tax your entire lifetime. You never build up an estate. You just transfer the money to somebody else, and when you retire, somebody else transfers money to you. There's never an estate. If you die just before you retire, you lose all of your taxes, which is particularly harmful to African American males who have the shortest average lifespan. But under this system, it actually builds up an estate. Now, there's a third part. Martin Feldstein estimates, and he was Reagan's chief counsel, chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors. Feldstein estimates that if you allow people to have this level of savings, so they have this amount of extra capital, you increase the economy by $7 to $8 trillion in size at the end of the first generation. So you have a bigger economy generating higher incomes, which allows higher savings rates, which allows a bigger transfer of wealth the right way, which is by creating it, which allows even more people to have an estate. So they then save more, which leads to a bigger economy. You see how this virtuous circle just begins to be a spiral upward.
Is there danger to people currently in the system from allowing a migration out of the system? I mean, it's something that every state deals with right now when they're in discussion of pension reform. The worry that creating a better system for younger people is going to put increased pressure on older people.
Well,
The
it's
generational
not just that. You just raised one of the most interesting stories about Social Security. In the 1980s, it was obvious that Galveston was very attractive. And in fact, the Social Security actuary who scored our plan, which Peter Ferrara developed, said that his estimate is if you make it voluntary, so nobody has to join it, between 95 and 90% of all the young people will join it. Because the economic return is so massive, you have to be absolutely stupid not to take it. It's just that much bigger a reward. So you take that model. So here's what happened in the early 80s. They looked around and realized, gosh, Galveston's really attractive. That would really make a lot of sense for groups to opt out of Social Security. So they made it illegal. They couldn't stand the competition. In fact, they were saying, yes, our product is inferior, but we want you in it, so we're not going to legally allow you to do this.
Once you're in your stuff.
Yeah. So what I'm doing is, I'm trying to find a model that says, look, if you're already in it and you want to stay in it, fine, we can finance. There are 3 or 4 things we can do that can finance the transition. And for example, there are 185, this is an amazing number, there are 185 federal programs for low-income Americans. Now, if you simply collapse them into a block grant and send back to the states, a single check, and eliminate all the federal red tape and eliminate all the federal bureaucracy, you save virtually enough to cover the transition cost to the new program. I mean, just think about it. You have 185 silos, each with their own bureaucracy, each with their own red tape, each then requiring the states to have their own bureaucracy with their own red tape.